The single rifle crack that echoed through Silver Creek, Colorado, one bright spring day in 1875, wasn't a warning shot at all. Before we kick off this adventure, don't forget to hit like on the video and let us know in the comments where you're watching from. It was the joyful sign that Grant Pike had just claimed Lila Lane as his bride. Folks crowded outside the whiteboard church and cheered, but one young woman in the crowd felt only a heavy ache inside. That was Ruby Lane, the quiet younger sister clutching a handful of wildflowers and willing herself not to cry. At 20, she'd always lived in Lila's shining wake. Everyone in town knew Lila as the beauty of Silver Creek, golden hair, polished manners, a laugh that drew men like moths. Ruby, with her chestnut hair and slender frame, was the thoughtful one, more at home with a ledger book than a dance floor. For months, she'd helped her sister choose lace and silk, smiling through endless chatter about becoming Mrs. Grant Pike. Yet not once had she heard Lila speak of love. Smile. Ruby, her mother, Ada Lane whispered sharply, nudging her ribs as the new couple stepped out to meet the cheering crowd. Ruby obeyed, though her cheeks ached from the effort. It wasn't that she wanted Grant herself, he struck her as pompous, but she wished Lila had more than a marriage of convenience and land. The celebration rolled on to the Pike Ranch tables, dressed with white ribbons and spring blossoms. Music spilled across the yard, while the prairie settlers danced and toasted. Ruby stood apart, watching Lila glide through the crowd, touching Grant's arm with well-practiced charm. "Not one for parties," a deep voice asked. Ruby startled and turned. A tall stranger stood there, broad-shouldered, dark hair, curling slightly clean-shaven face, set off by eyes the blue of mountain lakes she'd once visited with her father Amos Lane. "I suppose I'm just tired from all the preparations," she managed. He nodded toward the dance floor, where Lila and Grant shared their first whirl. "The bride is striking." "Yes, she is," Ruby admitted, a faint wistfulness in her tone. "She's your sister," he said, more statement than question. Is it that plain to see? Ruby tried to smile. "There's a resemblance, though subtle." He paused, dimples flashing. "You're more genuine." Ruby blinked. "I thought you were going to say plain." "I never would," he replied without hesitation. "I'm Cole Hart," he added, offering a hand rough from trail work yet gentle in its grip. "I guide wagon trains west. Just finished my latest run." "Ruby Lane," she answered, surprised at how natural her name sounded in his voice. "Would you dance, Miss Lane?" "I'm no dancer, Mr. Hart. Call me Cole. And I'm no dancer either. Makes us a perfect pair. Don't you think?" Something in his easy confidence coaxed her forward. They stepped to the edge of the floor, his hand respectful at her waist. His steps were stiff, but sincere, and Ruby found herself smiling for real. "So, Miss Lane," he asked, "what fills your days when you're not lending your sister to a wedding?" "I help Pa at the general store. And read whenever I can. A reader, my favorite kind. What stories, anything adventurous, places far beyond this valley." "I might trade you a few tales of my own," Cole said with a grin. "From the trail, not from books." "I'd like that," Ruby answered before shyness could stop her. As the music slowed, he released her reluctantly. "Tomorrow, maybe? There's a quiet bend in the creek south of town. Good place for stories." Ruby hesitated. Meeting a man she'd just met without a chaperone broke every rule she'd been taught. Yet something about Cole's steady eyes made those rules feel small. 2:00, she heard herself say. "I'll be there." His smile widened, warm and sure. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of glances and quick smiles. When it was time for Lila and Grant to leave for their new home, Ruby joined the well-wishers. Lila, radiant beneath her veil, hugged her tightly. "Be happy for me, little sister," she whispered. "I am, Ruby," said softly, even as her heart told a different story. "I wish you every happiness," Ruby said quietly as the carriage rolled away with Lila Lane and Grant Pike. The cheers of the prairie settlers faded, leaving behind a silence broken only by the clop of horses' hooves. She sensed a presence at her side. It was Cole Hart, his tall frame outlined against the sinking sun. He studied the dust cloud trailing the newlyweds. "Marriage is a curious thing," he remarked. "Some ride into it for love, others for comfort. Hard to tell which is which sometimes." Ruby glanced up, startled that he'd given voice to the very doubts she'd harbored about her sister's match. "And you, Mr. Hart, what would you choose?" Cole's blue eyes fixed on hers, steady as a mountain lake. "I've seen enough trail miles to know life's too short and too rough to tie yourself to someone you don't love with everything you've got." The quiet certainty in his words sent a tremor through her. Before she could answer, Ada Lane called from the church steps. "Ruby, help me with the cleanup." Cole tipped his hat. "Tomorrow, Miss Lane." 2:00. Ruby nodded, her heart unexpectedly light, as she watched him stride off the sunset, painting him in copper and gold. For the first time that day, she felt a real smile spread across her face. Morning broke bright and sharp over the Colorado territory. Ruby Rose's early chores at the family store finished faster than ever. By noon, her father, Amos Lane, looked up from the ledger, eyeing her with quiet amusement. "Something on your mind, Ruby?" he asked, adjusting his spectacles. She busied herself with a stack of canned goods. "No, Pa. Just thinking about Lila, I suppose." Amos watched her a long moment. "Met someone at the wedding, did you?" Her hands stilled. "What makes you say that? You've checked the clock a dozen times and wore your good dress on an ordinary workday," he said with a knowing grin. Heat flooded her cheeks. The blue calico was usually saved for Sundays. "He's just passing through," she admitted. "A trail guide named Cole Hart. We're only meeting to talk." Amos leaned back, thoughtful. "Hart. I've heard the name. Folks say he's honest, knows the trails like his own pockets." Relief softened Ruby's shoulders. Her father's judgment mattered more than anyone's. "Just be careful with your heart," Amos added gently. "And be home before dark." At 1:45, Ruby set out with a small basket of bread, cheese, and apples. The creek bend Cole had mentioned lay 10 minutes south, a quiet spot where Silver Creek slowed under tall cottonwoods. To her surprise, Cole was already waiting, seated on a fallen log with a weathered journal in hand. He rose as she approached, tucking the book into his vest. "Miss Lane," he greeted warmly. "I was beginning to think you'd changed your mind." "I'm early," she said, smiling back. "So am I," he admitted with a playful tilt of his hat. "Guess I couldn't wait." He took the basket and offered his arm, leading her to a patch of grass where a blanket was neatly spread. The simple thoughtfulness stole her breath. "I hope this suits you," Cole said suddenly, almost shy. "I've lived rough so long I may have forgotten what comfort looks like." "It's perfect," Ruby assured him, settling onto the blanket with the mountains rising like blue sentinels behind them. As they shared the meal, Cole spoke of his years on the trail, fording wild rivers, guiding families hungry for a new start, facing both friendship and danger among native tribes. Ruby listened spellbound by his steady voice and the sweep of open country he described. "What about your own people?" she asked at last. "Do they live near?" A shadow flickered in his eyes. "Lost my folks to cholera when I was 16. No brothers or sisters. Been making my own trail ever since." "I'm sorry," Ruby said softly. He shrugged, but the ache beneath lingered. "It was long ago." "And you?" he asked gently. Any family besides Lila? Just the two of us, Ruby answered. Mama nearly died bringing me into the world, so I was a surprise. And now your sister's married, Cole noted. Does that mean folks expect you to follow right behind? Ruby twirled a blade of grass. Mama surely hopes so. She's introduced me to every eligible bachelor within 50 miles. None caught your eye. They never saw me, she said with a quiet honesty. Once they met Lila, I might as well have vanished. Cole's frown was swift and fierce. Then they were blind or fools, maybe both. His words startled her, heat rushing to her face. You don't have to say that, Mr. Hart. I know my place. I've never been the pretty or charming one. I'm the practical one, the dependable one. Cole, he corrected softly. And maybe it's time someone told you being steady and true is worth more than 1,000 fleeting charms. Ruby blinked, the truth of it sinking deeper than she expected. In Silver Creek, beauty and sparkle drew the headlines, but perhaps there was more to a woman's worth than that. You're nothing like the men I usually meet, Ruby said at last. I'll take that as praise, Cole Hart answered with a crooked smile. Though I should be clear, I think you're beautiful, Ruby Lane, just not by the narrow rules this town sets. Warm color rose in Ruby's cheeks. You hardly know me. I'd like to change that if you'll let me. His voice was quiet, but certain. Their eyes locked, and a current of feeling swept between them both, exciting and a little frightening. A low growl of thunder broke the spell. Cole scanned the sky where dark clouds piled up. Looks like we'd best head back. They packed the picnic in haste, but the storm outran them. Rain hammered down as they reached the outskirts of Silver Creek, soaking them through. This way, Cole called, gripping her hand. He guided her to the porch of the small hotel. Breathless and dripping, they laughed together. So much for a peaceful afternoon, Ruby said, brushing rain from her brow. Nature makes its own plans, Cole replied, running a hand through his wet hair. But I wouldn't trade a single minute. His fingers still clasped hers. She knew propriety said to pull back, yet she didn't. I should get home, she murmured at last. My folks will worry. Cole gave her hand a gentle squeeze before letting go. May I come by tomorrow properly at your home? The thought of him meeting her mother made Ruby's heart skip. But she nodded. I'd like that. Until tomorrow, then. Miss Lane, he said softly. Ruby hurried through the rain, a strange certainty filling her chest. Life had just shifted. True to his word, Cole arrived the next evening at the Lane home, dressed in his best shirt and vest, dark hair, neatly combed, a small brown paper package under his arm. Ada Lane opened the door, curiosity bright in her eyes. Word of the mysterious stranger from the wedding had already spread through the prairie settlers. Mr. Hart, I presume, Ada said, weighing him with a careful look. Yes, ma'am, Cole replied, removing his hat. Cole Hart, I've come to ask permission to call on Miss Ruby. Ada's brows rose slightly at his polished manners, so unexpected in a trailman. Come in. My husband and daughter are in the parlor. Ruby sat straight on the settee, hands folded, while Amos Lane rested in his favorite chair. She had pinned her hair more carefully than usual and worn a soft green dress that brought out the hazel in her eyes. Cole entered with quiet confidence, shook Amos's hand firmly, and turned a warm smile on Ruby. Miss Lane, good to see you again. Mr. Hart, she answered formally, aware of her mother's watchful gaze. Taking the chair opposite, Amos Cole set his hat on his knee. Mr. Lane. Mrs. Lane. I'd like to speak plain. I've enjoyed your daughter's company and wish your consent to court her properly. Ruby's breath caught. They had shared only a handful of hours, yet the words felt right. Amos studied him. You guide wagon trains, I hear. Not exactly a settled life for a family man. You're right, Cole admitted. But I've been saving. I've put money down on good grazing land 20 miles west plan to start a horse breeding ranch. I know the work from my cattle drive days. That's a long way from town. Ada observed, her tone skeptical. The railroad is pushing that way, Cole answered. Within a year or two, the trip will be easy, and the land is still affordable for a man starting out. Amos nodded slowly. How long will you stay in Silver Creek? I've turned down my next guiding job, Cole said, glancing at Ruby. I'll be here through summer to get the land ready. After that, well, that depends on how things unfold. The unspoken meaning made Ruby's pulse quicken. I see no reason to forbid your calls, Amos said at last, provided visits are properly chaperoned. Ada hesitated, then gave a measured nod. Ruby is grown and can choose for herself. Relief softened Cole's features. Thank you. He turned to Ruby and offered the wrapped package. A small token of my regard. Inside, Ruby found the leather-bound journal she had noticed by the creek, its pages filled with his own stories and sketches. You mentioned loving adventure tales, Cole said quietly. These are mine. It was the most thoughtful gift Ruby had ever received. Thank you, she said, her voice low. I'll treasure it. Amos cleared his throat. Perhaps Ruby can show you our garden, Mr. Hart. My wife and I will take our tea on the porch, close enough to keep an eye on you both. Grateful for even that much privacy, Ruby led Cole out back. The spring garden, dotted with early blooms, carried the scent of fresh earth and the promise of new beginnings. Your folks strike me as fine people, Cole Hart said, as he and Ruby Lane strolled between the garden rows. They are, Ruby answered with a soft smile. Though Mama may take a bit of convincing, she always dreamed bigger for me than a horse ranch 20 miles out. Cole's brow furrowed. Is that how you feel too? Like you'd be settling? Ruby stopped and turned toward him. Cole. I can hardly sort my own thoughts. 2 days ago we hadn't even met, and now you're talking about land horses and a future that somehow includes me. It's a lot to take in. Too fast. Concern flickered in his clear blue eyes. Yes, she admitted, a shy blush rising. And yet not nearly fast enough. I've never felt like this, like I've known someone far longer than I truly have. Relief softened Cole's face. I feel the same. I've crossed half the frontier and met hundreds of folks. But you're the piece I never knew I was missing. From the porch, Ada Lane called, reminding them to keep in sight. Cole offered his arm, and they continued their slow circuit among budding vegetables and early spring blooms. Tell me about your land, Ruby said, eager to shift the weight of emotion. Cole's eyes brightened. He described a hidden valley cupped between gentle ridges, a stream running year-round, broad flats ready for a cabin and barn. He spoke of breeding strong, sure-footed horses that could face the harsh western ranges, and of the small herd already stabled near Denver. It sounds wonderful, Ruby said when he finished. A dream worth chasing. It is, Cole agreed. But lately I've been thinking dreams mean more when they're shared. The meaning hung between them unspoken, yet understood. They drifted into lighter talk books. They loved places they hoped to see, circling carefully around the pull that kept drawing them closer. When evening shadows stretched across the yard, Cole thanked Amos and Ada Lane for their welcome and asked if he might return the next day. Amos agreed with an easy nod, and Ada, though still measured, gave her consent. At the door, Cole briefly took Ruby's hand. Until tomorrow, Miss Lane. Until tomorrow, Mr. Hart, she replied, reluctant to let go. She watched his tall figure head toward the Silver Creek Hotel, a sure feeling settling in her heart. Nothing in her life would ever be quite the same. Over the next several weeks, Cole became a steady presence at the Lane home. Evening visits turned into long porch talks and walks through town under Ada's discreet eye. Sundays after church, he shared dinner with the family, impressing Amos with talk of current events and slowly winning Ada with his steady courtesy and open admiration for Ruby. By day, he rode out to his valley claim clearing brush marking fence lines and shaping the ground for what would become his ranch. He returned at dusk dusty and calloused, but with undimmed enthusiasm. "I set the first cornerstone for the cabin today," he told Ruby one evening, as they rocked on the porch swing, Ada knitting just inside. "It's simple, but built to last, and ready to grow." "I'd like to see it someday," Ruby said, picturing the remote homestead he described. "I was hoping you would. Your pa mentioned a trip next week to the Thompson place for a payment. That's close to my land. Maybe you could ride along and I'll meet you there." Her face brightened. I'm sure he'd welcome the company. And Amos did. The following Tuesday, Ruby rode with her father along the rutted trail west of Silver Creek. As the wagon bumped over hills, Amos pointed out landmarks and spoke of the hard first years of settlement. "This country's changing fast," he said, gesturing to the valley below. "When your ma and I came here 15 years ago, there wasn't a homestead for 100 miles. Now look, farms, ranches, a school, and a church. Progress keeps marching." "Do you ever regret leaving the East?" Ruby asked. Amos considered. "It was rough at first, especially for your ma. But no, there's nothing like building something from nothing and watching it thrive. That's a satisfaction you can't buy." By midday, they reached the Thompson Ranch. After Amos finished his business, they followed the side road marked by a lone cottonwood, the meeting place. Cole was already there astride a sturdy bay gelding. At the sight of Ruby, he swung down with an easy grace and hurried to help her from the wagon. "Mr. Lane, Miss Lane," he said warmly. "Glad you made the trip. We'll need to start back by 4, Amos replied, checking his pocket watch. "That gives you about 3 hours to look over the place," Amos Lane said, as he guided the wagon to a stop. "That's plenty," Cole Hart replied, with quiet confidence. "My horse can carry 2 without strain." With Amos's approving nod, Cole swung down and offered his hand to Ruby Lane. She climbed up behind him, her arms circling his waist as they set off at an easy trot. The closeness made her keenly aware of the solid warmth beneath his trail coat and the steady rhythm of the horse. "Hold tight," Cole called over his shoulder as they left the main track and followed a winding trail through pine and rock. The woods opened suddenly into the hidden valley he'd described so many times. Ruby caught her breath. Before them stretched a wide meadow of deep grass cradled between gentle slopes, a silver-bright stream weaving through it. Yellow and purple wildflowers sprinkled the field, and a small herd of deer leapt away at their approach. "Oh, Cole," she whispered. "It's breathtaking." Cole reined in on a small rise. "This is where the house will stand," he said, pointing to a stone foundation already taking shape. "Barn to the east, corral to the south, where the ground is flat." He helped her dismount, and they walked the tall grass together. Near the building site stood a simple camp canvas tent, fire ring, a few tools. "I stay here 3 or 4 nights a week," he explained, "trying to get as much done before winter. I want to set every first stone myself." Ruby felt a deep tug of respect. He wasn't just talking about a business, he was carving out a life with his own 2 hands. They settled by the stream to eat the lunch Ada Lane had packed, their talk drifting to the ranch plans. After a time, Cole asked quietly, "What's running through your mind?" Ruby hesitated, then chose honesty. "How different this is from anything I pictured. I always thought I'd marry a Silver Creek man, live above the store, keep to a safe, predictable life. Now here I am, beside a wild creek with a man I've known less than a month. thinking about horses and open country. Cole's calloused fingers found hers. I know it's quick faster than sense might allow, but some things don't follow the clock. Ruby looked at their joined hands. My sister Lila knew Grant Pike for years before marrying him. Everyone expected it. And yet, she trailed off. And are they happy? Cole asked softly. Ruby thought of Lila's letters full of social details, but little warmth. I'm not sure. I think they're content. Is contentment enough for you? Ruby raised her eyes. No, it isn't. It isn't enough for me either, Cole said, his voice low and certain. A sudden roll of thunder cut him short. Dark clouds gathered fast, just as on the day they'd first met. We'd better head back, Cole said reluctantly. Your father will be waiting, and that storm looks serious. They packed their lunch and mounted quickly. The wind stiffened as they reached the crossroads where Amos waited, pocket watch in hand. Right on time, he called. Let's move before the rain catches us. Cole helped Ruby down. Thank you for coming, he said so only she could hear. Seeing you here on the land, it felt right. It did, she answered, giving his hand a quick squeeze before stepping to the wagon. Will you be in town tomorrow? Amos asked. Yes, sir, Cole said. I've supplies to collect. Join us for supper 6 o'clock, Amos invited. As the wagon rolled away, Ruby turned to watch Cole, still astride his bay, outlined against the darkening sky, solitary, determined, and strong. He's a good man, Amos said quietly, following her gaze. Hard-working. Steady. Yes, Ruby replied, her voice soft but certain. He is. They reached Silver Creek just ahead of the downpour. Inside, Ada met them with relief. Thank heaven you're back, she said, drawing them in as the storm slammed against the house. All evening, while thunder rolled and rain battered the windows, Ruby's thoughts wandered to Cole alone in his canvas tent. Had he reached the shelter of the pines? Was he dry and safe? Sleep came fitfully, every thunderclap waking her. When morning broke, the world sparkled under a clean blue sky. Ruby moved through her chores at the store, mind still with Cole and the words they'd shared beside the stream. Distracted, she twice gave the wrong change and even misplaced an order for Nettie Brooks's flowers. Joseph watched his daughter with quiet understanding, saying nothing as he corrected each small mistake. By mid-afternoon, Ruby Lane was sorting a shipment of new fabrics when the bell over the door jingled. She looked up to see Cole Hart step inside clothes, still carrying the dust of his long ride, but clean-shaven and neatly combed. Mr. Hart Amos Lane greeted from behind the counter. Good to see you made it through that storm. Rough night, Cole admitted, but my tent held firm. His eyes found Ruby's across the room, a warmth in them that made her heart skip. She bent over her work, suddenly aware of the stray curls escaping her pins and the plain apron she wore. Cole spoke in a low tone with Amos words Ruby couldn't catch. Her father nodded a few times, serious but not displeased. After a short exchange, Cole tipped his hat to both and stepped back into the bright afternoon. What was that about? Ruby asked, unable to hold her curiosity. Just some business between Mr. Hart and me, Amos said with a knowing smile. Nothing for you to fret over? The rest of the day dragged. When Ruby was finally free to go home and ready herself for supper, she hurried to her room, choosing a blue cotton dress trimmed in white, one Lila Lane had often said brought out the color in her cheeks. Ada Lane watched her preparations with a discerning eye. You've taken quite a liking to Mr. Hart, she said, as Ruby pinned her hair in a softer style than her usual no-nonsense bun. Yes, I have, Ruby admitted, meeting her mother's gaze in the mirror. Ada sighed and sat on the bed. Everything's moving quickly. Are you certain of your feelings and of his? I know it seems fast, Mama, but with Cole, everything feels right, like finding a missing piece of myself. And his plans, that distant valley, the hard work it demands. Are you ready for that kind of life, for being so far from family and town? Ruby had asked herself those same questions. I believe I am. The land is beautiful, and Cole has a clear vision for what it can become. The railroad will reach there one day. It isn't as far as it sounds. Ada studied her daughter's calm resolve. You've always been the steady one. I suppose I should trust your judgment, even if it carries you away from us. Nothing's settled yet, Ruby reminded her, though her heart quickened at the hint of blessing. Hasn't it? Ada asked, with a wistful smile. She rose and smoothed her skirt. Come on. We'd best start supper. Your father and Mr. Hart will be here soon. Cole arrived on the dot of 6, bringing a small bouquet of wildflowers, like those growing in his valley. He presented them with a polite bow that drew an unguarded smile from Ada. During supper, he was all charm-spinning trail stories that even made Ada laugh. He asked Amos thoughtful questions about the store and Silver Creek's growth, showing genuine interest in the older man's business sense. After the meal, Ada suggested Ruby show Cole the new roses along the side yard. Amos simply nodded. It was the first real sign of trust Ruby had hoped for. In the gathering dusk, the roses glimmered pale against the dark leaves. Cole paused to admire them, but his mind clearly lay elsewhere. You're quiet tonight, Ruby said softly. I spoke with your father today about us, he answered. Her breath caught. And what did he say? That I should speak to you directly. Cole took both her hands in his. Ruby Lane. We haven't known each other long, but I've never been more certain of anything. I love you. I want to share my life, my land, my dreams with you. Will you marry me? Though she'd sensed this moment coming, hearing the words left her speechless. I know it's sudden, Cole added quickly. If you need more time. Yes, Ruby interrupted, her voice steady. Yes, Cole, I'll marry you. Joy broke across his face like sunrise over the hills. He drew her close, holding her as if she were the most precious thing on earth. I'll spend my life proving you were right to say yes, he whispered. When they returned to the parlor, hand in hand, no words were needed. One look told Amos and Ada everything. I take it she said yes, Amos said, rising to clasp Cole's hand. She did, sir, Cole replied, wonder bright in his voice. I still can't quite believe it. Ada brushed a tear from her cheek. Well, then we have a wedding to plan. After I've got the cabin and barn well started, Cole said, glancing at Ruby. Late summer, Ruby suggested, when the valley's wildflowers are in full bloom. August it is, Cole agreed with a tender smile. The next morning he rode back to his valley claim, promising to return each weekend. Ruby threw herself into preparations, ordering fabric for her wedding dress and gathering household goods for their new home. Within days, news of their engagement swept through Silver Creek, setting the prairie settlers abuzz with talk of the coming wedding. Most folks in Silver Creek were surprised that quiet, book-loving Ruby Lane would wed before many of the town's more sought-after young women. But those who truly knew her, like May Hollis, the shopkeeper's cheerful daughter, and Ruby's lifelong friend, were thrilled. I always knew you'd find someone who sees the real you, May said, as they sat side by side stitching Ruby's wedding gown. Ruby smiled, thinking of the way Cole Hart looked at her as though he'd stumbled on a rare treasure. I never expected it to happen this quickly or feel this certain. When it's right, May replied with an easy shrug. My folks were engaged after 2 weeks and they've been happy 25 years. The weeks flew by in a whirl of excitement. Cole's visits became the bright moments of Ruby's days, each one revealing more of the man she had promised to marry. He brought simple gifts from his valley ranch, a smooth, river-shaped stone, a hawk's feather, careful sketches showing how their cabin was taking form. In late July, Ruby received a letter from Lila Lane, written from Denver. The words were polite, yet cool, the congratulations measured. Reading between the lines, Ruby sensed a shadow of envy, not for Cole himself, but for the deep affection that seemed to fill Ruby's every sentence. As August neared, Cole came more often, eager to show Ruby the progress he had made. One evening he brought photographs taken by a traveling photographer, each image sharper than any drawing: the sturdy cabin, the rising barn frame, the corral beside the bright stream. "The roof's on," he said proudly. Windows set interior, coming along walls, floors, a few good pieces of furniture. Plain but strong. A fine place to begin our life. "It looks perfect," Ruby said, studying the pictures. "When can I see it again? I hoped you'd ask." Cole replied. "Your pa said you could be spared from the store for a few days. We could take May as a chaperone and stay with the Thompsons overnight. That way you can really get to know the place." The thought of leaving her family home so soon stirred both excitement and an ache of parting, but Ruby agreed. Their trip the following week proved far more pleasant than her first visit. Summer skies were clear and warm, and May's lively talk made the ride cheerful. Cole rode alongside the wagon Amos had lent them, pointing out ridges and old trail markers, filling the journey with stories. When they finally topped the last rise, Ruby's breath caught. The valley below had changed almost beyond recognition. Where once there had been only a stone foundation and a tent, now stood a snug log cabin with a wide porch looking out on the creek. Smoke curled from its stone chimney. Nearby, a barn's frame stood ready for siding, and a neat corral waited for horses. Beside the stream, young vegetable rows shimmered green in the sun. Cole Ruby whispered, "It's wonderful." May let out a soft whistle. "You've been working hard, Mr. Hart." Cole's face shone with pride. "Had help this past month, a couple of Dust Creek riders needing work. But yes, it's coming together." "Come inside," he said, guiding them toward the cabin. The interior was simple, yet full of thoughtful detail. A big room with a stone hearth serving as kitchen and living space, 2 doors leading off: one, their bedroom, the other a smaller room, Cole said could welcome guests now, and someday children. Ruby flushed, while May stifled a grin. A sturdy table and chairs, a rocker near the largest window, and shelves ready for dishes gave the room a warm, practical feel. The kitchen had a proper stove-wide counter space, and even a pump that brought water straight from the well. "No more hauling buckets," Cole said with quiet pride. "I've ordered window glass. It should be here before the wedding." Ruby walked slowly from room to room, imagining winters by the fire and summer mornings with the door open to birdsong. It might not be grand, but every beam and board carried care and purpose. "What do you think?" Cole asked, watching her intently. "I know it's not the life you're used to." "It's perfect," Ruby said, and meant every word. Relief softened his face. "Come see the rest, the spring house, the garden spot where I plan to plant apple trees next year." They spent the rest of the day exploring the property, Ruby listening, as Cole described each hope for the seasons ahead. By nightfall, when they headed to the Thompson ranch, she could already picture a lifetime here, so different from anything she once imagined, and far more alive. The final weeks before the wedding spun past like a fast river. Ruby's gown of ivory silk with lace cuffs was finished elegant in its simplicity. Ada Lane, now fully at ease with her daughter's choice, helped Ruby prepare her trousseau and pack household goods for the new home. Evenings found Amos and Cole deep in talk about crops, finances, and sound ranching practices. Though Amos never said so outright, it was plain he had begun to think of Cole as the son he never had. The day before the wedding, Lila Lane arrived from Denver with Grant Pike beside her. The sisters embraced, though a touch of surprise showed in Lila's eyes as she took in the quiet confidence of Ruby's new life. "You look different," Lila Lane said, at last glancing around Ruby Lane's room where trunks and boxes stood ready for the wedding journey. "Stronger somehow, more sure of yourself." "I feel different." Ruby admitted, her smile calm and steady. Happy. Certain. For a heartbeat, something wistful crossed Lila's flawless features. "I never pictured you as the one to marry purely for love." Ruby's eyes softened. "Didn't you?" Lila looked away. "Grant is a good husband. He provides well, and we have a fine house in Denver. Many women would envy me." "But do you love him?" Ruby asked gently. "I'm fond of him," Lila said after a pause. "That ought to be enough. We share the same ambitions, the same view of life." Ruby thought of Cole Hart, of the quickening of her heart, when he entered a room of the shared dreams that bound them. "I hope it's enough for you," she said quietly. "I truly do." The wedding morning broke bright and clear, as though the prairie sky itself offered its blessing. The ceremony took place in the same white-board church where Lila had wed Grant Pike, but the resemblance ended there. Lila's wedding had been a grand society affair with imported blossoms and lavish trimmings. Ruby chose a simpler path. Wildflowers from Cole's Valley graced the altar and pews, their fragrance pure and clean. Standing with her father, Amos Lane, in the small anteroom, Ruby waited for the signal to begin. Her ivory gown, modest but elegant, brought a proud mist to Amos's eyes. "You look beautiful, daughter," he said, his voice roughened with feeling. "Thank you, Pa," Ruby replied, adjusting her light veil. "Are you sure you're ready to give me away? It's a long road from town." "A father's never truly ready," Amos said, squeezing her hand. "Whether it's to the next street or the next territory. But knowing you'll be with a man who truly loves you makes it easier." The first notes of the organ, played by Rose Hollis May's younger sister, floated through the doors. Ruby drew a deep breath and stepped into the sunlight-filled aisle on her father's arm. Neighbors and friends, the prairie settlers, filled the church, yet she saw only Cole at the altar, dressed in a new black suit, his eyes alight with love and wonder. The vows passed in a dreamlike rush. Pastor Clyde Boone's words, the steady pressure of Cole's hands, the cool weight of the gold band he slipped on her finger, and the deep, sure kiss that sealed their union. The celebration spilled into the town square beneath lantern-strung cottonwoods. Music, laughter, and savory food filled the evening. Ruby danced the customary sets with friends and neighbors, but her eyes sought Cole again and again, drawn by an invisible pull. At last he guided her aside to the quiet of the church steps. "Mrs. Hart," he said softly, savoring the new name. "Are you happy?" Ruby reached up to touch his cheek, marveling that this steadfast man was now her husband. "Happier than I ever dreamed." "I keep thinking of the day we met at your sister's wedding," Cole said. "How I walked in with no idea my life was about to change. I remember watching you, wondering who you were, never once distracted by the crowd." Ruby smiled. "I wondered if you even noticed me with Lila shining the way she does." "I did notice her, maybe for 2 seconds," Cole admitted with a small grin. "She's lovely, but in a way that felt rehearsed. Then I saw you quiet, thoughtful, real. I couldn't look away. When we danced, and you spoke of books and adventure, I was already half in love before the song was over." Warmth flooded Ruby at his confession. "So you sought me out on purpose?" "I couldn't help myself," he said simply. Reluctantly, she said, "We should get back to our guests. Tomorrow, at this time," he whispered, as he offered his arm, "we'll be home our home." The next day, their journey to the valley felt like a joyful procession. Several wagons traveled together, Amos and Ada Lane with the last of Ruby's belongings, May Hollis and her father bringing gifts, and Ruby and Cole leading the way in their own wagon, drawn by a team from Cole's breeding stock. When they crested this final ridge and the valley spread before them, Ruby caught her breath. Cole had been busy with surprises. The cabin and barn were dressed with ribbons and wildflowers, and a sign over the porch read, "Welcome home, Mrs. Hart." Inside the corral, a sleek chestnut mare grazed. Cole Ruby whispered, eyes wide, "What have you done?" He gave a shy, proud smile. "I wanted our homecoming to feel special. The mare is my wedding gift to you, gentle, yet spirited, just like her new mistress." Tears brightened Ruby's eyes. "It's perfect. I don't know what to say." "Say you're happy," he murmured, his own voice thick with feeling. "Say you don't regret choosing this life with me." Ruby turned to him, not caring that their family's wagons rumbled closer. "I will never regret choosing you, Cole Hart, not for a single day." Their first evening as husband and wife in their new cabin was spent welcoming Amos and Ada inside, showing them every lovingly built corner of the home that would shelter generations to come. May Hollis and her father were among the last guests to arrive at the Hart homestead, eager to see every improvement Cole Hart had made since their earlier visit. They would all stay the night, making use of the spare bedroom and the new barn addition Cole had built with visitors in mind. After a hearty meal that Ada Lane and Ruby Lane prepared together in the roomy new kitchen, the group gathered on the porch to watch the sun pour gold and purple across the valley. Amos and Cole spoke of enlarging the corral. Ada kept her knitting needles busy, and May strummed gentle tunes on the guitar she'd brought as a wedding gift. Sitting beside Cole on the porch steps, Ruby felt a deep, peaceful certainty. This valley, this home, and this man were the life she was meant for. What had begun the day of her sister's wedding had led her to a happiness she'd never dared imagine. Later, when their families retired and the night grew quiet, Cole took Ruby's hand and guided her to their bedroom. A lamp glowed softly over furnishings, chosen with care, a bed covered by the quilt Ada had sewn as a gift, a chest of drawers Cole had built himself, and a small shelf, already holding Ruby's favorite books. "Welcome home, Mrs. Hart," he whispered, drawing her close. Ruby looked up at the man who had truly seen her when no one else had, who had shaped this life with his own hands. "I love you, Cole," she said, the words both simple and immense. His kiss began gentle, then deepened with a warmth that spread through every heartbeat. As they came together, as husband and wife for the first time, Ruby knew beyond doubt that this was the love she had always longed for, strong, tender, and unshakable. The years that followed proved the strength of their bond. The Hart Ranch prospered Cole's horse breeding operation, gaining a reputation that drew buyers clear from California. Their home expanded too, room by room, as their family grew. Luke Hart in 1876, June Hart in 1878, and Noah Hart in 1880. Ruby found rich purpose in her roles as wife, mother, and trusted partner in the business. Her clear mind for figures and steady nature balanced Cole's drive and vision. Together, they faced the rigors of frontier life, bitter winters, hard births, and the endless labor of tending and enlarging their land. And Amos and Ada Lane visited often, especially after Amos sold the general store and retired in 1880. They stayed for weeks, Amos lending a hand with big projects, while Ada reveled in time with her grandchildren. Lila Lane's trips were less frequent, but over the years she relaxed in Ruby's warm household. Though her own childless marriage remained formal, she grew genuinely attached to her niece and nephews, arriving with fine gifts from Denver and lively stories of city life tales as exotic to the Hart children as Cole's old trail adventures had once been to Ruby. By 1885, the railroad stretched to within 5 miles of their valley, making visits to Silver Creek and beyond much easier. Ruby sometimes took the children back to her hometown, now thriving with the bustle the railroad had brought. They often stayed with May Hollis, who had married the town's new doctor and lived in a gracious house near the enlarged church. On one such trip, Ruby strolled the main street with 10-year-old Luke and 7-year-old June, when she met Grant Pike, now a prosperous banker. "Lila's in Denver overseeing home renovations," Grant explained after a polite greeting. "You look well, Ruby. Country life clearly suits you, Bree." "It does," she said, thinking of her valley, and the family awaiting her return. "I hear your husband breeds fine horses," Grant added with a formal nod. "Yes," Ruby answered, her pride quiet but unmistakable. "Cole has a real gift for it, and for many other things." Grant gave a restrained smile. "Give him my regards. I must get back to the bank." As he walked away, Ruby felt a moment's sympathy for both him and Lila. They had wealth and status, but not the deep, abiding closeness she shared with Cole. That evening, after wiring Cole about their travel plans, Ruby sat on May's porch watching the children play in the dusky light. "Ever miss living here?" May asked. Ruby thought it over. "Sometimes I miss the convenience being able to fetch what I need in a short walk neighbors close by. But no, I don't miss it. Not when I have our valley." And Cole, May added knowingly. And Cole. Ruby echoed, her heart warming at the sound of his name. The next day, as the train carried them homeward, Ruby watched the countryside change from farmland to rugged hills. The children chattered about seeing their father and little Noah, who at 5 had stayed with Cole to help with the horses. At the small station 5 miles from their ranch, Cole waited with the wagon, Noah perched proudly beside him. The boy leapt down and ran to his mother and siblings, while Cole followed with his easy, measured stride. Ruby knelt to embrace her youngest son, then rose to meet her husband's gaze. Even after 10 years, the way he looked at her made her heart quicken. "Welcome home," Cole said softly, wrapping her in a strong embrace as their children danced around them. Over his shoulder, Ruby saw their thriving homestead, the expanded house, the big barn and multiple corrals, the young orchard spreading green against the hills. "It's good to be home," she said, certain she was exactly where she was meant to be, with the man who had once walked past her sister and chosen her instead. If this story has touched your heart, I invite you to stay with us to discover more true tales of the Wild West, stories that honor resilience, tenderness, and the spirit that God placed in those who blazed the trail. Subscribe, share, leave your thoughts in the comments, and join us once again to journey across this untamed land. Thank you.